Hey folks, David Thomas Tao with VinePair, and today we are looking at Traveler Whiskey from Buffalo Trace. It is their first of its kind, well at least for them, partnership with country music superstar Chris Stapleton. What is in this blended whiskey? We're gonna get into that, or at least make some educated guesses, and talk about that partnership, and most importantly, we're going to taste and rate this sucker. So let's dive in. Let's talk about the stats. 90 proof, $40 MSRP, blended whiskey from Buffalo Trace, their first ever celebrity partnership with Chris Stapleton, whose maybe most famous album, kind of the album that rocketed him to superstardom, was called Traveler. This is actually, more specifically, it says on the back, a collaboration between Buffalo Trace master distiller Harlan Wheatley and Chris Stapleton. They're both listed as co-founders of this project, Traveler Whiskey. What is in it? Okay, the blended whiskey rules in American whiskey are kind of interesting. Blended whiskey can actually have a pretty significant percentage of neutral grain spirit in it. It doesn't all have to be straight whiskey. Buffalo Trace and parent company Sazerac have said, this is all whiskey, no neutral grain spirit in this. What they have not said is exactly what types of whiskey are in this. Bourbon, rye, Canadian whiskey, light whiskey, we don't really know. It's a blend of straight whiskeys, and that's all the info they're giving us. The straight whiskeys, presumably from their distilleries. They own a number of them. They're a big spirits conglomerate. So that's the one thing that people have really talked about is like a big question mark with Traveler. What is in it? They're not really giving more specifics, and we asked. I promise I asked them directly, and they just said it is a blend of straight whiskeys from their various distilleries. That's all we know right now. And I just want to point out that they kind of designed this, and Chris Stapleton was actually heavily involved in the design of the bottle and the label. That's something that he talked about at a release event I was at. This is actually supposed to kind of look like a tack strip that might traditionally go over the top of the bottle, and then just change it to the label. Let's give it a shot. Oh, great cork. It's interesting. It's like a wooden top with a synthetic cork. Kind of interesting. All right, the nose on this is like really interesting. Is a terrible word. I hate using that for whiskey. Like, what does that mean? The nose on this stands out because this is not nosing like, and this doesn't smell like any other American whiskeys, any other whiskeys. It could be Canadian whiskey in this. All right, on the nose, it's unique. This does not smell like any other whiskey I've had recently. I actually get golden raisin grape, which is kind of interesting. This nose is actually a little bit of sweetness, like a light caramel, almond extract, which is something I get on a lot of rye whiskeys, especially Canadian rye whiskeys. Don't know if that's what's in here or not. This almost noses like a brandy. This has like some really brandy-esque elements on the nose. There's some oak, it's super light, it's very sweet, very grape and raisin forward. It's not off-putting, it's interesting. It doesn't nose like any whiskey I've had recently, or in any memory, actually. It just noses kind of like it is. It's tough to compare this to anything. It's just different. Let's taste it. I always taste with my right hand. Do you taste with a specific hand at home? I don't know. I like to taste with my right hand and make it consistent on my reviews, like literally. All right, 90 proof, drinks right around that. It's sweet. Corn pudding? Cornbread? Cornbread with nutmeg. Yeah, I got a lot of weirdly grape notes on the nose. The palate, lightly sweet. Cornbread, a little bit of light spice in the way of nutmeg, maybe a tiny bit of clove and cinnamon. Going back to it, this is something I wrote about in my written review. The mid palate kind of tastes like flat cola, which again is not unpleasant, it's just different. It's a hard one to pinpoint. I can't really think of any like comparisons. If you ask me what other whiskeys this tastes like, especially from American producers, I probably couldn't name too many. It's different. It doesn't have a ton of depth. The sweetness is not unpleasant. I'd really like to try this in some mixed drinks. I'd love to try this on a Gold Rush, actually. The mouthfeel, actually a little more viscous than I expected, a little thicker than I expected. The finish is short, a little medicinal cherry, a little bit of grape coming back. Got it on the nose, didn't get much on the palate, got it on the finish. Yeah, the finish just not really super doing it for me. It's just falling a little flat. To be honest, look, let's be straight up. This whiskey, I did not hate it. The Traveler whiskey has been kind of divisive. Some people have criticized Buffalo Trace for not being transparent about what's in the blend. I would love them to tell me what's in the blend, and I asked, but they didn't. That's their prerogative. I get it, it's okay. I didn't hate this. I just want to be very clear. I think this is a whiskey that is targeted at a budget range, even though it is actually slightly more expensive than Buffalo Trace's like flagship bourbon. And I think this is meant to be a very adaptable whiskey, something you're gonna see in a lot of different types of drinks. That's mostly what I expect to see Traveler in mixed drinks. Now, can you sip it neat? I'm sipping it neat, I'm not hating it. I'll probably finish this glass. As far as score, I give this an 87. It just doesn't have a ton of depth, and I was actually a little bit excited when they said there was no neutral grain spirit, but it was still a blend of straight whiskeys. I was like, ooh, I know Buffalo Trace is really good at blending whiskey sometimes. That last drop release they had, where it was a blend of American straight whiskeys, absolutely phenomenal. The Mr. Sam batches, another blend of straight whiskeys, including Canadian whiskeys, absolutely phenomenal. This doesn't quite have that depth to get there. This is not a 90+ point spirit. I'm giving it an 87. I think it's adaptable. I think there's gonna be a market for it, and it does taste different. So if you're looking for something, a change up, and you wanna take, a $40 risk, give it a go, experiment with it in cocktails. That's probably what I'll end up doing with my bottle at home. For VinePair.com, I'm David Thomas Tao reviewing Traveler Whiskey, the newest from Buffalo Trace. Let me know what you think of this product if you've tried it in the comments below, and I will respond. You can also just make fun of me, and I'll also respond. Let's be friends about it. Until then, I'm David Thomas Tao, drinking the whiskey so you can too.